Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy. Welcome to the first ever Circuits in the Woods Electronic Music Festival. In case you haven't noticed, you are here in Brattleboro, Vermont, an important place for electronic music. I don't know what to say other than thank you so much for being here. There's tons of stuff happening all day till just about midnight. We're going to end here. There's other stages. If you didn't get a program up at the front desk, please grab one from James. There's a map there with a full schedule of all of the venues that are incorporated today. Come find me if you have questions, or other people who look like they know what, wait, I don't know what I'm doing. You can find someone who looks like they know what they're doing, or me. The first person on our schedule is a natural choice to begin an electronic music festival. I am extremely fortunate to have worked for Charles Dodge in a different context, but I'm so excited that he lives close enough that he can be here today and be part of this, because so much of what's happening in electronic music now, we can point to him, but he's going to tell you about it. I'm not going to tell you his story, he is, but what I would love for you to do is give him a big round of applause.
Well, thank you very much. It's indeed an honor to be honored in a context, in a town that I feel so strongly in favor of. I think the culture in Brattleboro, the culture in the surrounding towns is akin to mine, and I feel very fortunate to be able to be singled out in that context, because there's so many wonderful things happening here that you almost have to pick and choose. And today I'm the pick. So what I'm being featured for, I guess, is something I did so long ago. It's before most of you were born, and that's so it's an honor to think that might be in some sense relevant to the culture that we experience today. My story, and I guess we have to go there, is that I grew up in a middle-class household in the Midwest, in a college town, and in the 1950s. And since I was a lousy athlete and not very attractive to girls, I decided that I wanted to be a composer of music, that maybe that would have some effect. Not certainly on my athletic abilities. And I just, I had studied some music as a kid. I was a kid. And then, I studied some violin, and then some piano, but my real love was playing the saxophone. And I did that throughout, junior high school and high school. Sometime along in there, I guess it was even in junior high school, I thought, well, playing is fine, but composing is really what fascinates me. And I think part of what fascinated me is that it wasn't real time. It was something that you thought about and tried and revised. I didn't have any confidence that my first thoughts would be of any interest, and so I chose a path where they didn't have to be. That I could try something and then I could try to make it better. But of course, this is the 1950s, and electronic music barely existed. Did in only a couple of quarters. I went to the University of Iowa and studied music composition, and I studied with a wonderful guy who helped me a lot. And by the time I had graduated from college, I had, a sheaf of compositions, I guess you could say. And this was a time when higher education was still funded. And so I had scholarships. I had a scholarship to go to a university of my choice. I was interested in electronic music, and so, thank you. So there were two places I could have gone. I could have gone to the University of Illinois, which is really an interesting place at that time. But I grew up in Iowa, so it wasn't exotic enough. The other place I could go was Columbia University in New York, and that's what I chose to do. Columbia was the home at that time of an institution that was known throughout the country for doing electronic music, and that's what I wanted to pursue. Got there, wrote some music, attracted some attention with my music, got a scholarship to Tanglewood in 1964, got a commission to write a piece for Tanglewood in 1965, and a composer, it was a group of composers who were chosen to write pieces, and one of them was a guy named J.K. Randall from Princeton University, and he'd done a little piece of computer music, and that fascinated me. Well, I already knew about computer music because James Tenney, who was a guy that I had met in a couple years before at a composers conference right here in Bennington, Vermont, and Tenney had if you can believe this, had a job as a composer at the Bell Telephone Company's research laboratory, the Bell Labs in New Jersey. And so he had written some computer music that I heard in 1963, and some of it was really fascinating. So the combination of electronic music at Columbia, which was one technique, and computer music that came through Tenney to me was another. And then in the electronic music class at Columbia, the professor was Vladimir Usichevsky. Usichevsky was often on the road doing gigs, and so he would get guests to come talk to the class. This is 1965. Max Matthews was invited. Max was at Bell Labs, was head of behavioral and acoustic research at Bell Labs as a very young man. His boss was, the vice president for research there was a guy named John Pierce. Pierce was the one who thought up and implemented satellite communication. He did the Echo satellite in the 50s. So Pierce could do no wrong at Bell Labs. He was like the minor god. Matthews was a friend of Pierce because they both loved music, and Max told the story of how he and Pierce once went to a concert by a composer I won't mention, and left thinking, geez, I think we could do this better with computers. And so they went back to Bell Labs, and Max, who was an amazing guy, amazing engineer, invented a way to make sound with digital sound. He couldn't do it at the Bell Labs because it wasn't work related. So what he did was rent time on a computer an IBM computer in Manhattan to write a program that would make musical sound, and that's where that came from. Max was giving this talk to get back where I was. Max was giving this talk to Usichevsky's class in 1965, and the class was full of people, many of whom, were accomplished composers. I'm not me, but at that time. But guys in their 30s and 40s. Because that was the thing that one should learn about. Anyway, Matthews gave this talk where he played some what the serious composers in the room would regard it as silly little compositions. Although based on probably interesting ideas that musically weren't of great importance. And somebody asked, and of course, to make computer music, you needed a huge computer that was, cost millions of dollars, and it could only be done at a big institution like Bell Labs or a university like Columbia. So somebody asked Matthews, sort of tongue-in-cheek, well, what do you think the future for this kind of thing is? And Matthews said, well, I look forward to the day when somebody can come home from work, like a plumber can come home from work and sit down at his home computer and make music. And everybody thought the man was mad. But 15 years later, people could come home and work on their little home computer to make music. So Matthews was just had a vision of the world that was unique and a great inspiration to a lot of us, certainly to me. So by the end of the 60s, I had learned how to make music with a computer. And I should explain that it was a really dumb thing to do because, as I mentioned, you needed a huge computer, which meant you had to be affiliated with an institution. And two, there were only a couple places in the country where you could listen, where you could actually convert digital information to sound. Columbia University at that time was not one of them. One of them was at Bell Labs, and there was also one on the West Coast at Stanford University. So here's how you made computer music on the East Coast in those days. You went to the computer center after you had punched up your program on IBM cards, fed those into the computer, and hopefully they read properly, often didn't. Then the computer would process your files. Sometimes, usually if it was important, like if it was defense research, they would do it immediately. But if it was music, it would be overnight. So you'd come back the next day, and then you'd find out if the computer program that you had written actually ran, because we often had bugs in them. If it ran, then you'd get a printout, and if you got a printout that looked promising, you would then request the digital format of the computer run. It was stored on a big digital tape. You would then put the tape under your arm, call Bell Labs, and make an appointment to go listen to the music you just composed. And so it was a little like learning how to play the piano by, striking a key and then waiting a week to see what it sounded like. It was really a dopey way to make music, believe me. And it really took, infinite patience and a lot of what. I don't know how to characterize the way the state of my mind in those days, but it's probably not completely healthy. Anyway, by 1970, but it was really fun when it worked, when you could hear what you did. Oh my goodness, here you had a musical performance, and the new music scene in New York at that time was another story entirely. Very hard to get for a young composer to get music played. As there was a lot of, you had to just wait in a long line. So this was a way to develop as a composer by hearing what you did and then trying to improve upon it. So by 1969, I had finished my doctorate at Columbia, and it was with computer music. I had a commission to write a piece for the Library of Congress, and I did it, a piece of computer music, and it was received politely. And unlike a predecessor of that one, where it was played at a concert in New York at the Greenwich House Music School, where at the end of, there was a loudspeaker on the stage, pieces played, and a prominent local musician, piano teacher, walked up the aisle to the front of the room, wadding up his program and threw it at the loudspeaker on the stage. So polite indifference was a very nice thing to me. And then, so let me play you a piece. The first piece that I was really pleased with. It's called Earth's Magnetic Field. The story there is that Uzhevsky got a call actually from a physicist. You've heard of the Goddard Center for Space Studies. It's near Columbia, and they're very much into climate research now. In those days, they did a lot of different things. And there were these scientists who were geophysicists who were tracing different phenomena. One of them was the effect of the magnetic field that surrounds the Earth on its magnetism, and sun, the radiation from the sun as it deforms the magnetic field that surrounds the Earth. Well, it turns out there was a geophysicist in Switzerland named Bartels who had devised a way of representing that graphically with something that resembled music notation. It's called Bartels musical diagram. So these guys wanted to see what they really sounded like. So they contacted Usichevsky. He wasn't doing that sort of thing, but he recommended me. And it was a great thing. I had finished my dissertation, and I had some time on my hands, and had the summer to work on this thing. And then, anyway, it came out on an LP record in the fall, and I was very, just overjoyed to have done something that I was really pleased with, and that other people seem to enjoy too. I hope you do. So the thing about the piece is this: every time you hear a note, so bum 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 bum. Every time you hear a note, that's a new reading of the Bartels musical diagram. There are 12. There are how many readings a day? I think it was every 3 or 4 hours there was a new reading. It was averaged from a dozen stations around the world, and so that's a lot of notes. Right? That's thousands of different readings, and I just devised some some programs to feed into the computer that would read those values and output them as musical notes. At first, you'll hear every time you hear a note, every time you hear a change of pitch, it's a new note. Then there are other ways of interpreting the data, but certainly the piece from beginning to end represents 1 year of sunspot activity as it affects the magnetic field. So let me play you some of that. This. It might actually work. Is it too loud? three sections. The first one is sort of like Chubby the Tuba. The second one is where there goes bop, bop, bop. Well, you hear it in three sections, right, so far. It's every time, and that's based on the data, the sunspot data. What I tried to do is get the music to reflect something of the inner logic of the data that was based on, so that there's something that in the Bartels musical background is called a sudden commencement. And what that meant was that there was something that happened in the data that was an anomaly, or that was happening quickly. So I divided up the data into the sudden commencement sections, and what you just heard was the first three. First like Tubby the Tuba, the second one the bop bop bop, ya. But what that is that section, what I noticed in the data is there were lots of double, you'd have a reading one, and then a reading two, and then maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you get another double reading. Well, the long notes in between, the long notes were the double readings, with just a single note, and then in between with these flourishes were all the notes that intervene between that and the next double reading. So it was, I suppose, very academic of me. I was trying to do something that would just reinforce the data that it was based on. Anyway, one of the, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the things that you did as a composer of computer music in those days was make an appointment to go to Bell Labs to hear what you wrought, and but in order to, when you did that, you'd walk down this long hallway to where they had this computer that you could use to convert your digital tapes into sound, and along the hallway you could hear what the researchers at the lab were working on, and what they were doing was working on electronic speech. So I can remember walking down there and hearing something like a crow going caw, 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 and they're working on being able to reproduce diphthongs, for example, and so synthesizing speech was something that I guess we all curse now, but at that time was a real interesting invention, especially for a composer who could see speech as a concatenation of pitches and noises, and because when you say tsk, that's a noise, and you say ba, that's a sort of a pitch, or it can be, and so over the next couple of years, I was able to moonlight. I had, by that time, I had to earn a living as a teacher, so I was teaching at Columbia, and in the evenings I got permission to go out to Bell Labs to use one of their speech programmed computers to make to see if it would be possible to make anything musical out of the speech research. Max, of course, was the head of this whole department, Max Matthews, and of course he was interested in what music could be made with what he did day to day. And so eventually I was able to use a program devised by a researcher named Joseph Olive, which was based on in this way. You'd speak what you wanted to synthesize into the system, and then you would be able to, the system would enable you to analyze that in terms of just what I mentioned, the vowel sounds and the consonants. And it turned out, and Olive had implemented an editor, so you could change the speed of the speech without changing its pitch. You could change the pitch of the speech without doing anything, or you could prolong anything that you wanted to do. So over that period of time, On the academic side, Mark Strand was a poet who was teaching at Columbia at that time, and I knew him. We'd both been at the University of Iowa at the same time, and I kept pestering him to give me, to let me have some poems that I could play with, and he had these 4 little poems. He just read them to me over the telephone. The first one is, when I am with you, I am 2 places at once. When you are with me, you have just arrived with a suitcase which you pack with one hand and unpack with the other. It's a nice representation of just classic ambivalence. And so I thought ambivalence, that's kind of what using ambivalence is kind of what using a computer to make speech is about. So that's where I started. With synthesizing voices, and there are 4 little songs that I made, and you can hear. Maybe I'll just play the first one and the fourth one. What you can hear is the progress that Olive was making in the accuracy or the reality, realness, I guess you'd say, of the speech that he was synthesizing. So the first one is, it's often hard to understand what the voice is saying. Let's see.
When I am with you, I am two places at once. When I am with you, when I am with you, then I am with you, then I am with you. When I am. I you. When I with you am two places at once. Two with you. At once, two places with you. When you are with me, I am two places at once. When I am with you, when I am with you, when you are with me. When you are with me, you have just arrived with a suitcase. You pack with one hand. Unpack with the other.
So that's the first of the 4 speech songs. Now I'll play you the fourth one, which not only, notice that was just one note at a time. The next one enabled us to actually add voices together. So it's got a more complex texture.
The days are ahead, the days are the days ahead, ahead. The days are ahead, the days are ahead, the days are ahead, the days are ahead. Days are ahead. The days are 1,926,946. 926,345. Later, the nights will catch up. 1,926,346 to 1,926,345. The nights will catch up. Will catch up. 45. Later, the nights will catch up. Later, the night will catch up. Will catch up. Later, the night will catch up. The night will catch up. Later, the night will catch up.
Yeah, I thought it was just kind of funny to have all that singing about numbers that are falling, and it's a kind of a cute poem about about not much of anything. There was a lot going on in the world of using computers and audio during that period. Bell Labs wasn't the only location. There had been some early work at MIT by what's his name, Thomas Stockham, and another composer whose name I've forgotten. But Stockham then left MIT and went to the University of Utah, where he formed a digital image processing laboratory, and it was quite advanced for its time. In fact, in the 80s, Stockham founded a recording company called Soundstream, and Soundstream would digital recordings. They had studios in Utah, and they also had one in Germany, as I recall. They were, They were there's a good word for it that I can't think of. Sony came along and just kind of blew them out of the water. So it was very good technology, but it was very expensive technology, and Sony figured out how to do it much less expensively. And took over the market. But Stockham had a lifelong fascination with recordings, and he was an especial fan of Enrico Caruso, the famous opera singer from early in the 20th century. So, in one of his graduate students was given a project for him to pursue, and it was this. The old recordings of Caruso were, recorded not into a microphone, but into a megaphone, kind of a reverse megaphone-like structure, which, unlike modern microphones, would distort the resonances of the voice. Stockham figured out a way to first digitize an old Caruso recording and then to de-resonate it. RCA owned the rights to Caruso's recordings, most of them anyway, and to his visual image and the like. So Stockham went to RCA and said, "Look, we can do these improved Caruso recordings," and they did. They released on LPs in the 70s a whole series of de-resonated Caruso recordings. Well, Stockham's student, Neil Joseph Miller, was given the task of not only de-resonating the voice, but also taking out the scratchiness that was an inevitable artifact of the recording process that Caruso experienced. So he processed an old recording, famous aria Vesti Regiuba from Pagliacci, and he recorded it, de-resonated it, and removed the scratchiness from the recording. It's pretty amazing, I mean, for 1970s technology. And the thing that fascinated me is that not only did he take out the scratchiness, he took out the orchestral accompaniment. So I got it, and Stockham and I knew each other slightly, and he generously loaned me a tape of the deresonated Caruso with no accompaniment. Of course, I've been doing this with my own voice, right? Feeding my recording of my own voice into the computer and playing with it, as you heard in the speech songs. Well, this gave me an opportunity, as I like to say, I had a great performer. I'd always wanted a great performer to play my music, and I finally had one who was in no position to refuse. And so I fed the Caruso recording into my computer. By this time, Columbia had its own sound system for digitizing things, and started playing around with it. And it was just kind of a joke that here you'd get Caruso singing high and low and slow and fast, and it was fun entertainment. Then a pianist, an English pianist, Stephen Montague, asked me to write him a piece of music. I got a commission actually from the British Arts Council, and so I thought, well, why not? Caruso has no accompaniment in these recordings. Why not use the piano as the accompaniment? And write a piece, around that relationship. So that's what I did, and I went to RCA. Very nice. Jack Pfeiffer was the head of RCA Records at that time, and got an appointment to see him. And I told him, what I could do, and played him a few little things, and unsurprisingly. RCA didn't want Caruso singing new tunes; they wanted him to sing the old ones. So they weren't interested. They weren't interested in what I had to do as far as RCA was concerned. Of course, this was not a big deal. I just, was in 52nd Street or something, and I was living in New York, so it was easy to do. So where was I? The idea was that yes. I waited a long time to hear what RCA's decision was, and they finally decided. And then it turned out that the American copyright law was first passed in 1909. Okay, well, this particular Caruso recording was made in 1907, so it wasn't in copyright, and so their legal department ruled that. They couldn't do anything about what I did with the recording, but I couldn't use his name or his visual likeness in any connection to this piece. So that's when I decided to name it Any Resemblance is Purely Coincidental. and this is the recording of the Caruso voice, synthesized and played with a live pianist. So I can, yeah. A well-known composer, having heard that piece once, congratulated me on he said, "Congratulations on your piece." And my response was, "Yes, I wish I'd written it." No, Caruso is such an amazing voice, and so perfect for the feelings that go with Pagliacci, that it was really a pleasure to work on, and a lot of fun. I was just told that I could run over a little bit, and so with your indulgence, I'll do that. I was going to skip something, and I guess I won't now. I'm going to play excerpts from a couple more pieces. One of them is, as you can see, that was from 1980. I got interested then again in writing music that involved human performers as well as electronics. And MIT had an experimental music studio in the 80s, and they got a grant to commission me to write a piece using their facilities. So my wife was in law, we lived in New York, my wife was in law school, so I almost never saw her. And so what I would do is go up to MIT on the weekends and work on their computers. And of course I was still teaching during the week in New York. So by that time at Brooklyn College. And I like to say that I lived in Brooklyn when it was Brooklyn. It's an in-joke, yeah. So the next piece, the piece that I wrote for MIT was based on the opening of the first chapter of Virginia Woolf's The Waves. There's the prose at the beginning of that is just astonishing. And so I chose that text for a piece for my friend Joan LaBarbera to sing with. And she has a very extended, she was one of the pioneers of what they call extended vocal techniques. And so she could do Tibetan chant, and she could do a lot of things with overtones in her voice that a trained singer would be discouraged from. And so, and yet she had a wonderful voice herself, and a wonderful speaking voice. And so the way this piece began is by recording Joan speaking the paragraph from the opening of The Waves. And then the rest of the piece is based on that recording, both by snipping out parts of the consonants so that those become the percussion sounds, and also tracking her voice, the pitches of her voice, which are very, very musical, and then when she speaks, and then imposing musical lines on those. And so the piece is called The Waves, after Virginia Woolf's novel, and I'll play you the opening of it.
The sun had not yet risen. indistinguishable from the sky. The sun had not yet risen. The sea was indistinguishable from the sky, except that the sea was slightly creased. As if a cloth had wrinkles in it. Gradually, as the sky waned, a dark line lay on the horizon, dividing the sea from the sky.
So, yeah, so it goes on and on, and thank you. Yeah, and Joan sang it a number of times, and it was always a pleasure to hear her. You know, something I should have said at the outset of this is that, you know, I was one of those people who was always, you know, who happened to be at the right place at the right time. It could have been somebody else. I was just there with, you know, I knew Max Matthews. I went to Columbia. There were facilities that were available only in a few places. And I was very fortunate and to live in a time that, you know, honored experimentation and so that, you know, I just wanted to say that. Also, something I've been very fortunate in that my son Bear Dodge is a very fine musician. Over the years, there was always a question of, you know, life as really most of the people in this room realize, it's very hard to earn a living as a musician, and so you have to do a lot of different things usually in order to make ends meet, and so when Baird was growing up and showing such enthusiasm for music, I thought, oh my God, you know, this poor kid. You know, that he's, and so he went to, yeah, so anyway, he went to Juilliard on Saturdays and learned to play violin and viola and played it with some very, very good musicians. He was lucky, in his own way, in this. It was at a time when there were, Midori was about a contemporary of his. That's a name of a famous young woman violinist. And so he was always good at it, but never a star. And that served him very, very well, because he could then just learn to play music beautifully without worrying about being, you know, what kind of an impression he was making. And so, and in fact, when he graduated from high school, well, he had a Juilliard recital, and he played both violin and viola He played one of the Brahms viola sonatas just absolutely gorgeously. And then he went off to college to major in chemistry. And I was so pleased. He and his, you know, his mother and I were divorced when he was quite young, and she was always a great fan of his music making, and I, as somebody that's trying to make a living as a musician, was always, ambivalent about it. So anyway, he made it. He was also very funny. When he was a senior in college, the question, what are you going to do? He majored in chemistry. He said, Dad, I think I'm going to become a musician, even though my mother wants me to. Which I think is just absolutely perfect. So he did. He spent a couple years, doing the worst that one could imagine. He was, freelancing in Philadelphia. He had gone to a college near there. And I had this picture of, his busking for the rest of his life on the corners, of Philadelphia. He did that for a couple of years, then he went and got he studied for a master's degree at Stony Brook in New York State, and then went back to Philadelphia, and by that point he was able to he played in the Northwest Pennsylvania Symphony Orchestra, and he played in the Wilmington, Delaware Symphony Orchestra. A lot of different, he was able to cobble a career together. And then he started auditioning. He won an audition to be a violist in the Chicago Symphony, and that's a real gig. And so that's what he's been doing ever since. At some point, he re-auditioned on violin over viola, and now he's the second violin section in Chicago. But when he was 18 or 19, I wrote this piece called Viola Elegy. My friend Morton Feldman died in 1987. It affected me, and I had something that I wanted to do about that. So I wrote an elegy for viola and computer. The computer part, I'm very, at that point, by the mid 80s, I was writing computer programs to help compose the music itself. And so the viola elegies for a computer part and viola. The computer part was done with an algorithm that I wrote for the computer and produced a tape. Then what I did with that tape was to sit down with it and listen to it and write a viola part to go with it. So it was real composing along with the algorithm. I'll play you the beginning of that piece. It's called Viola Elegy. Anyway, and Baird played it first when he was 18 or 19, and then when this opportunity to record it came up, he said he really learned it cold. He did a beautiful performance. Sorry about that. It goes on like that. Thank you. I think that's all I'll play today. I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that aren't too disparaging. And otherwise, I'm honored to have been able to play some excerpts from some pieces some of which I realize now are over 50 years old, and it's really amazing to me that there's any interest still in that stuff. And thank you very much for listening and for being here. I had to take I have hearing aids, and the whole thing was sounding so bad. And then I realized that because when I took the hearing aids out, it just sounded damped, but more realistic. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Wendy.
Let's give another round of applause.